live stream. We are now live, so you may go ahead and start the meeting.
Okay, well, good morning all. Welcome to the July meeting of Heritage Kingston. You have an agenda, and we have one correction on that agenda on page 41. The second last line should read notice of intention to demolish, not designate. And if you could make that change, I would then ask if there are any additions to be made to the agenda. And seeing no hands, look for a mover for the agenda. I don't have everybody's faces, by the way, Derek, on screen, so I'm looking for hands.
Okay, Peter, so what you'll just need to do to change that is go to the top right corner of your Zoom and then click on the view. You'll change it to gallery view. And now you should be able to see everybody.
Okay. Oh, aren't they all nice? I saw a hand before, and it was Jennifer's, and I see William Kelly's hand seconding the motion. Any discussion on approving the agenda? Seeing none, then those in favor, those opposed. Yes, remember you have to put your hand there so I can see a hand. The minutes of the last meeting, we have one amendment to it on page 3. Again, the second bottom line should read, Mr. Taylor stated that he did not intend to see the dormers redesigned. So with that correction, looking for a mover for the adoption of those minutes from somebody who was at the meeting. Don, and seconded by William. Discussion, changes, corrections. Seeing none, then those in favor of adopting those minutes. Those opposed, they are adopted. Thank you very much. Pecuniary interest disclosure. And the usual reminder that if anything does come up during the meeting, please speak immediately. Presentations. Mr. Clerk, no presentations.
That is correct.
No delegations.
Correct.
Briefings.
There are none.
Cultural heritage business.
There is none today.
In fact, we go through the business and come down to stat business. Okay. 194 Johnson Street. Amy, I believe you're presenting this.
Yes. Can everyone hear me?
Yep. Welcome.
Great. Yes, this is a heritage permit for alteration at 194 Johnson Street. Sorry, I'm just trying to exit the full screen so I can see my notes. It's designated under Part 4 and Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act as part of the Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, Derek, please. The property is located south of Johnson Street, east of Sydenham Street, across from the Hotel Dieu Hospital. Again, in the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, Derek. The site includes a 2-story stucco house that was constructed in 1842. You can also see in this photo the 1-story flat roof brick addition near to the garage that was constructed in or by 1908 and provides a second entrance. A number of repairs are proposed as part of the application to the main house, including to the roof, windows and doors, trim, and to the stucco walls. The next slide, if Derek can move ahead, is illustrates some of the some photos of the detached garage on the property that's understood to have been built in 1892. But has undergone a number of modifications over the years, including the flat frame front addition to the facade that mainly adds height to the structure. The majority of the alterations in this application are proposed to the detached garage. You can see on this, the one side view is wood framing and the other 3 sides are stone. Next slide, please, Derek. Here's the rear view of the garage, as well as a view down the side. There's quite a grade change, so quite a significant retaining wall as part of the one side of the structure. The stone wall facing the neighboring property will remain intact and exposed as part of the proposed alterations to the garage building. Not shown in the site photos that I took, unfortunately, was the later 1960s two-story addition at the rear of the main house, which is a concrete block addition with stucco cladding. But there are some photos in the Heritage Impact Statement submitted by Bruce Downey. Next slide, please, Derek. The property was designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act in 1984 and Part 5 in 2018 or 2015, sorry, as part of the Old Sydenham. The Part 4 designation bylaw has a very brief statement highlighting the main house, the 1842 dwelling, as well as some associative value to some prominent figures in the mid-1850s. The reasons for designation, or sorry, the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District property inventory evaluation expands on the features on the property and highlights architectural details of the main house. It does not reference the detached garage or the 1960s addition at the rear. The property is rated significant in the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, Derek. The concept plans in the, in this slide illustrate the additions to the property. There'll be an addition linking, or there's proposed an addition linking the main house with the detached garage, as well as a two-story addition, and with the solid red coloring is a two-story addition to the detached garage. There's a one-story addition linking the two structures, as well as a small one-story addition at the front of the garage setback from the main house. It's important to highlight, or I'd like to highlight, I guess, that the design of the addition avoids causing irreversible changes to the main house by linking the addition to the rear 1960s portion. It will involve the removal of a porch off the 1960s addition and a removal of the portion of the wall. Overall, predominantly the additions to the property are at the rear of the property. The next slide illustrates another site plan showing the use of the main floor of the buildings. So there's proposed to be a common room in the link between the structures. There'll be overall 6 called habitation units in the main house and 1 in the garage, and a common room in the linking portion, as well as still some space for parking inside the garage as well as out front. Next slide, please, Derek. The elevations on the next 2 slides illustrate the view from the street and the rear. This would be from Johnson Street. So the alterations include the removal of the flat framed front that exists today. The garage will remain lower in height than the main house. The facade will also be set back. It's the intent of the applicant that the lower profile of the renovated garage facing the street will return focus to the main house. Next slide, please, Derek. This is a view from the rear yard and the glazing at the rear. The additions connecting, or the additions to the garage and the connection to the main house will include metal roof, wood trim and siding, and metal clad wood windows and doors. The cladding material is intended to be complementary but distinguishable from the stucco of the main house. And this is consistent with policy in the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District Plan for additions. In the next slide, please, Derek, is the recommendation, the recommendations in the next 4 slides. Staff reviewed the application alongside policy in the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District Plan, the official plan, the province's 8 guiding principles in the conservation of built heritage properties, and Parks Canada standards and guidelines, and found the proposal to be consistent with the intent of these policies. The recommendation is for approval. The scope of work is detailed in the next 2 slides, including the repairs to the main building, including the roof repairs and repair of windows and doors. And on the next slide, the repairs to the trim and the stucco walls are described, as well as the addition connecting the main dwelling to the garage and the garage enlargement. I could go through these in detail if the committee would like, but maybe I'll just skip to the conditions that are outlined in the next slide. So the conditions include that the proposed works be undertaken in accordance with the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District Plan, that all Planning Act applications be completed, and in this case that includes a minor variance application that's being processed concurrently, and I understand it'll be considered at next Monday's Committee of Adjustment meeting. And of course a building permit is required, and that drawings submitted as part of the building permit process be provided to heritage planning staff for review to ensure consistency with the heritage permit and the Old Sydenham plan. There's the reference to the city's windows policy, that all window works be completed in accordance with that policy. Of course, the masonry policy as well be adhered to. All exterior outdoor wooden replacements be treated for exterior exposure, and that's a guideline from the Old Sydenham plan. Then any stone removed to facilitate the enlargement and additions to the new garage be salvaged where possible for potential reuse in any areas of the garage requiring repair, or to incorporate it as a design feature elsewhere on the property if possible. And then last slide includes conditions pertaining to tree protection and preservation. Next slide, please, Derek. There was a tree preservation plan submitted with the heritage permit application and the minor variance application, identifying 8 trees on the property and tree preservation measures to protect those trees. The condition here just emphasizes the need to adhere to the recommendations of that report. That the 10th condition relates to coloring, that be submitted to heritage planning staff prior to application for review and approval to ensure complements the heritage character and attributes of the district, and that any minor deviations from the submitted plans that meet the intent of the approval and do not further impact the heritage attributes of the property be delegated to the Director of Planning Services. So that concludes my presentation. I know that the applicant's Bruce Downey is here as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I ask members of the committee if your dash comments have been correctly published, printed. And seeing no concerns, members of the public wanting to make comments or ask questions?
I'll remind any members attending that if you wish to speak, just please use the raise hand function. So that button is located at the bottom of the right-hand side of your screen where the list of participants is. If you don't have that list up, click on the participants button on the bottom of Zoom. Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands.
I'm not seeing any hands. I was waiting for Bruce's. Yeah, that's okay. Committee members, questions?
We have a hand up from Mr. Kelly Heineman.
Mr. Heineman.
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just one thing in the conditions. I noticed that the colors and the are not being submitted to the committee. Isn't it usual that the committee would look at the colors and make comment on them? Thank you.
Amy?
Sorry, am I unmuted?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I think, well, in my, sorry, in my recent experience, I think sometimes those details can be addressed after the fact. Coloring is, well, I think that it's somewhat common that coloring is worked out at later stages of the process, and we look to the Conservation District Plan for guidance in that. It's typically something that's dealt with at a delegated authority level with other projects. So it's the applicant may have more details to provide at this time, but it's thought to be something that staff can handle when more details are available.
Firstly, any excuse me, further comments on color, and otherwise any further questions?
We have
Don?
Dawn. Yep.
And then Jane. Don?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Basically, I don't have any significant comments to add to my dash comments, but just like to mention that some years ago, this property came to the Heritage Committee for possible renovations by a previous owner. And at that time, I was able to visit the house, the property, and the interior. And I was particularly struck by the windows on the front facade. And so as I mentioned in my dash comments, it's very important that they be handled carefully, and I'm sure they will be. But I'm always worried when I see the condition that the windows policy will be followed, because I realize that in practice that's almost meaningless. Applicants can more or less do what they want and say that they're following windows policy. But in this case, the windows are pretty special. They have characteristic wide and narrow glazing panels for a certain period of 1840s or 50s. And also the storm windows, or at least some of them, have that same combination of wide and narrow glazing panels. And so it's important that the storm windows, existing storm windows, which everything seems to be in very good condition, that they be retained and repaired rather than going to other treatments such as adding interior panels. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Don. Jane, you had a hand?
Yes. I'm supportive of the repairs for the main building, but I would like to reiterate my concerns about the very limited access to the rear of the building from the point of view of maintenance of the rear of this designated property. Although I realize that there is currently quite limited access, it seems that this is an opportunity to attempt to rectify it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Now, in the addendum that was sent out last night, Bruce Downey had a comment on that. Bruce, do you want to comment on that now?
Am I hooked up?
Yep, just fine.
Okay. Audio only, it looks like, right? Is So
That's
I
correct.
could actually be naked here. The
You are on my picture.
right. Access seems to historically always have been quite limited to the rear garden of this property. And if the access from the street wasn't limited enough, they had a drop off on the west side and the south side of the property. Although we do find that there is a fence along the north side of the property that is at the end of a driveway of properties off Sydenham Street. And I know that some early on, we discussed the possibility of inquiring to those property owners if for access for major vehicles to get in, we could create a gate in that fence in order to get in for that purpose. But that would be the only way that we could possibly get anything of significance on the size of machinery. So in lieu of that access difficulty, we have created large doors off the side of the garage into the interior courtyard that is created by the addition link. And then we intend to have doors that go right through that addition link. So the interior courtyard is connected to the rear garden by the addition, through the addition link, which can be somewhat like a pavilion that you can pass from one garden, interior garden, to the back garden. And the intention is that addition link would be a slab on grade so that it could take bearing of any equipment that had to get from one part to the other. So it has been a point of discussion, and we believe that would be sufficient to deal with maintenance issues related to the rear of the property.
Okay, does that satisfy committee members? Somewhat. And obviously fire and safety get involved in this as well, Bruce, I presume, at some point, and have to give approvals and things. Further questions from committee members? If not, your final comments? And if not, the motion can either be, needs to be moved and seconded and then cannot be amended or deferred. I look for a mover for the proposal as printed with all the additions. I'm not going to read it all the way through on page 2 and 3. Moved by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Don Taylor. Those in favour? Those opposed? And I see that as carried. Thank you very much, Amy, Bruce, and others who were involved in that. And good luck. Fascinating house. And Don, you'll keep your eye on it. You live over the back, I believe. Okay, we move on to (179) Sydenham. And Ryan, is that you?
Yes, that's me, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ryan. Okay, good. Another part 5.
Well, sort of. This is a bit of an interesting one, and it includes both 179 Sydenham and also 241 and 239 Princess Street. The file is slightly different from what the committee typically sees. This property is a listed heritage property, it's not designated. And as you may recall, listed properties are only an inventory of properties that council believes to have cultural heritage value. The owners are not required to gain prior approval for any alterations to the building or changes to the property, such as an addition. However, being listed on a register does require the owner to give council notice if they intend to demolish part of or all of a building on a listed property. So the question that council the question to council then becomes, is the proposed demolition detrimental to the cultural heritage value of the property and thus warrants further review or a complete stoppage to that demolition. So the question is not whether the property warrants designation. We already know that this particular property has cultural heritage value and is worthy of designation. The question is whether the current demolition warrants immediate action by the city to conserve the cultural heritage value of this resource. So please keep this sort of distinction in mind while I walk you through this application. You want to go ahead to the next slide?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So the purpose of this report is to notify and to provide council with a recommendation in response to a notice of intention to demolish a portion of this non-designated property. The subject property, as I mentioned, is on the northeast corner of Princess and Sydenham Streets. The property includes a 2-story red brick mixed-use building. Can you go to the next slide? It was constructed in 1891. It's known historically as the Oddfellows Block. Go to the next slide, please. And so this is the elevation on Sydenham Street, which is the most relevant to our discussion today. And if you go to the next slide, and the application is to remove a 1-story rear addition, which I'll get to in a second. But the cultural heritage value, it's important to note, as I said, it's a listed property built in 1891. It has associative value with the Oddfellows Relief Association, and it's designed by a well-known local architect, Power and Son. The list of attributes in our background report on this one relates explicitly to the 2-story red brick building, the openings, the details of that building, and its prominent location in the Sydenham Prentice Street corner in downtown Kingston. You'll note that the rear 1-story brick addition is not listed. It was actually noted as a modern addition. So if we can skip ahead, I believe we have a picture of it. So what is before committee today is the applicants are proposing to demolish this particular 1-story addition. It's a red brick addition built sometime in the 20th century. And their intention is to replace it with a 2-story addition in order as part of their interior renovations to this building. The new addition would include a stairwell, entranceway, and garbage room, and is to facilitate the conversion of the upper floors of the Oddfellows Block to residential units. The complete submission was received on June 19th, and it includes a heritage impact statement prepared by Plus VG Architects, which is in your agenda package. They've included copies of the concept plans for the new addition, as well as the statement of significance that the city had archaeological research associates prepare back in 2015 on the heritage value of this property. The report is currently being submitted to committee for information and consultation purposes before it goes to council on August 11th. In accordance with Section 27 of the Heritage Act, council has 60 days to make a decision on this or to act on this proposal to demolish. This provides council time to determine whether the proposed demolition requires immediate action in the form of a notice of intention. Should a notice of intention be passed on this property, it would have the effect of voiding a demolition permit and require further review and formal approval by council prior to issuing the demolition permit. And this 60-day appeal timeframe expires August 18th. Comments that were received by the committee members have been included in Exhibit E, and further comments from today's meeting could be added to Exhibit F. And I would note the heritage impact statement that was submitted by the applicants notes that the rear addition is clearly a later intervention and does not contribute to the cultural heritage value of this site. And then they quote that its removal will have little impact on the site or surrounding area, unquote. The HIS goes on to note that most of the proposed works on the subject property will be on the interior of the buildings, except for this demolition and rebuild at the rear. The primary heritage attributes, that being the Oddfellows Block building itself, is proposed to benefit from masonry repairs and repairs to the cornice. Any impacts to the rear walls of the heritage building that have not already been impacted by the current addition are to be concealed by the new addition. So based on the ARA assessment and the HIS provided by the applicants, staff have no concerns with the proposed demolition of the rear addition. The proposal to retain the brick mixed-use heritage building and increase in the intensity of the use within will conserve the fabric of the original structure and its contribution to the heritage character of Princess Street and this part of Kingston. We recommend that council receive the notice of intention to demolish and take no further action. So as I mentioned, committee members have provided comments which are summarized in Exhibit E. Two of the members did provide comments regarding the proposed design of the new addition. And I note that the committee's role in this matter is to advise council if the proposed demolition warrants a passing of notice of intention to designate to halt the demolition and conserve the heritage value of this property. Comments regarding the design of the new addition have been provided to the applicant and their team for consideration, but are really out of scope of this current process. So if we skip to the next slide, there's some of the plans. You can see this is the existing layout of the Sydenham Street elevation with the Gildersleeve building next door, which is a designated heritage property there. You can see in the top left. The next slide, please. So this is our recommended motion, Mr. Chair, pretty straightforward. Just that council receive the notice of intention to demolish and take no further action. And I'm happy to take any questions. I believe a representative of the owner is here, maybe. Anyway,
Yes, they are here, Ryan.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Members, can you please confirm your dash comments have been correctly printed? And seeing no concerns there, I don't believe. Members of the public making comments and asking questions.
I'll remind folks about the use of the raise hand, but I don't see any. Although, Mr. Chair, I do see Miss Gummo has her hand up. Perhaps she has something to add.
Oh, Andrea, I'm sorry, you've got slid in there. Yes.
We'll allow her
Andrea?
to speak.
Hello, thank you so much. And through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to confirm that the long-term intent is to designate this property and protect it under the Heritage Act. It's not essential to do it right now. It remains in queue with a number of other buildings that we would like to continue to designate moving forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Other members of the public? And I don't see any hands. So we go on to committee members asking questions, and I notice Jane. Who is,
yes.
There she goes.
Could someone clarify how this one-story building is attached to the Oddfellows building? Are there any penetrations?
Ryan, do you know that one offhand?
I'm afraid I do not, Mr. Chair. I don't have an answer for that one.
Anybody else? I don't think we've got any others here, have we, who know that building?
Mr. Clerk, or sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm Mr. Clerk. Mr. Chair, we do have one of the applicant's representatives from Plus VG, Peter Burton, on the call, and I believe he's unmuted his microphone. So Peter, could you add any information?
Hi, we don't know how much it's penetrated the building, but typically a building like this would have probably just been applied to the existing building. We intend to expose the brick inside that stairwell. And so where the addition hits the building, the new addition will be hitting it as well. So any blemishes or marring of the brick would be recovered, I think. So I don't see that it's going to be a problem.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for listening in as well. Is that okay, Jane? Good. William had a question. Sorry.
What I wanted to clarify is that demolishing this is not going to impact on the structure. I need to have this confirmed. Demolishing this wee building is not going to impact on the structure of the Oddfellows building.
No, it will not.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you very much. William Kelly.
Well, thank you so much. I do agree with the recommendation here, and I think the demolition of this existing addition to the Heritage Building is a good thing. And so I look forward to this project.
Thank you very much. I'm looking for other hands or other waving and not seeing any. Don. Don Taylor.
Yes. This is a kind of tricky application, quite unusual for the committee. And there are sort of, in a way, it's a lot of it is good in that I think everybody feels very positive about the proposed renovations to the main building and the upgrades and habitation dwellings there. And it's also good that nobody is going to miss the rear addition, which is going to be demolished. Nevertheless, I have a lot of concern about procedures that we're following. And I've had some discussion with both with Ryan and Andrea, and I think the committee should hear a little bit more about that. It's a strange situation. We have a building that the city wants to designate. 5 years ago, it was studied and it was agreed that it should be designated, yet it is not designated. And now it's coming to a situation where there are major renovations, a partial demolition, and that is surely the time for designation to be put in place. But I understand it's a pain to get buildings designated. There's a cost in resources and time and so on. And the city evidently feels that it could easily be delayed for some time in the future, maybe in another year or two. I really don't find that acceptable. The effect of doing that, well, this committee does have the option to send a message to council and say that the building should be designated. And that would stop the demolition, but we don't want to stop the demolition. We're happy to have the demolition stopped. And it will also interfere with the proposed renovations, and we don't want to interfere with them. But if we do nothing, we are taken out completely out of the system for sort of overseeing renovations and changes to this property. And, I think, I don't want to suggest that we don't trust the applicants and we don't trust city staff, but there is a Heritage Act that gives this committee, which is supposed to have some expertise, they're supposed to represent the community, they're supposed to be supposed to provide input on this kind of situation. And if we don't go to council and say, let's designate it, then we lose any control whatsoever. And there is, I think, an important element where we really should have some input to this process. In my opinion, the proposed new addition, I've looked at the conceptual plans, I think they would be unacceptable in any heritage district. The other heritage districts in Kingston emphasize that new additions should use compatible materials, should avoid large expanses of glass and modern materials. And basically this is really a glass box, which has really no design qualifications for its location between two designated buildings. It will be an important part of the streetscape. The staff suggest, well, there are other glass fronted additions in the area, so it's okay. those other glass fronted additions, I think, are regrettable. And committee certainly never had and probably never would support those other glass buildings. So my first reaction on seeing this application was to draft a motion asking council to issue a notice of intention. But as I say, that in a way that's raises problems because we don't want to stop the demolition. We don't want to interfere with the renovations. But I still think that we should, the committee should consider that carefully, maybe for the next meeting of the committee. By that time, it will be too late to interfere with the demolition. It may still play a role in the proposed renovations and the proposed new design of the rear addition. But I think this is probably something that I and others should consider carefully between now and the next meeting of the committee. I mean, I think I think it's unfortunate that the Heritage Committee is simply taken out of the process. It's a question of procedure, and procedures are important. I'm also, about this new glass addition.
Now, Don, the addition really isn't part of this this motion. We're also remind you in a part 5, so we cannot.
No, we're not
amend...
in a part 5. We are not in a part 5. This is not part 5.
I have been advised it is.
No, I think that's. I think someday it probably will be, but it's not part 5. It's a designated.
Mr. Clerk, can you make a comment on that, please?
Actually, I believe Miss Gummo has her hand up and can provide some more context. So perhaps we can turn it to her.
Yep.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So Dawn is correct in that this is not a part 5 in that there's no heritage conservation district in this area. But in terms of our procedures and where this falls under the Heritage Act, we are processing this the same way that a part 5 application comes before the committee. So the addition is out of scope of this application, but I do want to address some of Dawn's comments just because I think this is a good discussion to have, and it's certainly something that seems to come up fairly regularly. We, as much as possible, are trying to move to a more proactive approach to designating so that we designate properties well in advance of someone bringing forward a renovation proposal or properties changing hands. So that's something that we're trying to get out of this cycle of reactive designations, because it does actually take the same amount of sort of staff and procedural resources to bring forward one property as it does a whole batch. So what we're trying to do as much as possible is focus our resources into batches of properties so that we can bring them forward all together and essentially get more properties designated faster across the city. Because as you know, we do have literally hundreds of properties awaiting designation right now. So in this case, there is a plan to bring forward a designation on the property, or potentially to work with the owners on a heritage easement agreement through this reno project, which would achieve the same goals. So right now we are in discussions with them about that option. And it's certainly something that the committee would see again in future. And I think if we do end up bringing it through a part 4 in future, it would be the same as our normal process. You would see a batch of them, and this would be among the batch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. William, you have a hand up.
Yes.
And you need to unmute.
Thank you so much. I certainly totally agree with Don. And I would hope that the 2 councillors sitting on the committee might bring that to attention of council. What Don has said that we'd like to see a more proactive use of designation in the future. However, in saying that, with this particular application, okay, that this discussion is outside the scope at this time. And like Don, I don't want to eliminate or stop the demolition of this building. And so I think we have to just look at what we have at hand. And it's a non-designated building. They've come to us, which is great. And we have to accept, in my opinion, the recommendation of the staff. However, I think we need to send a strong message to council in the nicest possible manner, of course, that we proceed with a little more expediency on the designation of properties that Don was speaking of today. And I thank Don for bringing that up. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And I would suggest that that probably could be done under notices of motion, giving a notice of motion for the August meeting that we will recommend designation of this building. Councillor Doherty, did I see you moving?
Thank you. Actually, I had very similar questions as Don had. I was really surprised that the Oddfellows building was not designated because it seems such an obvious one to be designated. And so, Andrea, when you were just talking about batches, have we never done that in the past? And why like? I'm surprised that we haven't gone along Princess Street and taken, there's a lot of historical buildings there, and that we would have taken all of those in batches, and then therefore we would have had the Oddfellow building in the designation. So I'm just, because I'm still learning about heritage, I was just wondering if you could just give a bit of background on how we chose in the past what got designated and what didn't, because the batching just kind of makes a lot of sense, and I'm surprised to hear that that hasn't happened.
Andrea?
Definitely, yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair. So you and I both, Councillor Doherty, I've been surprised by some of the buildings across the city that are not yet designated. And it seems to me that it's just a matter of staff time and resources. So as was mentioned for this property back in 2015, we did have, we retained consultants to do some work on the background, which would then provide the details to be able to designate. And then that next step to actually bring the designation in, we just haven't had a chance to do it yet. And you know, I've been in this position for about a year now, and it's my observation that part of the reason why we haven't gotten some of that work done is because we are so busy responding to one-off requests. So a lot of the designations that we've advanced over the last few years seem to have happened in response to a development proposal. And so then staff time is very much occupied in creating that designation kind of very quickly and bringing it through on its own. And so I think going forward, what I'm really trying to do is make sure that we're applying our staff resources as efficiently as possible so that we can designate more buildings. Because I think we do have a huge amount of heritage resources across the city that we haven't brought in to be protected quite yet. Thank you.
I would also add there, Councillor Doherty, that in my experience, the number of designations that have taken place in the past 10 years was vastly more than in the 10 years previous to that. So there has been a huge increase, but it certainly is a slow job. Other members?
Hi.
Yeah.
I have a question for Andrea. When do you expect the next batch to take place? And a question for the applicant. What is the timeline that you're looking at for the demo and subsequent alterations? And then I might need to comment after that. Thank you.
Okay, start with Andrea.
Thank you, and through you. So we actually have a batch of 17 properties ready to go that we'll be bringing forward to the committee. The timeline on that batch was impacted, unfortunately, by COVID and some of the staffing resourcing issues that we've had in the department as a result of that. We have brought additional additional planners in to process heritage permits so that we can continue to move that forward. So that's something that I expect you'll see in the coming months. I'm a little hesitant to commit to a specific meeting just yet, just because we still do need to contact some of the owners that are implicated by these designations. But they are ready to go. And then as soon as those are through, we'll be starting on another batch. So it's the kind of thing where we'll be rolling them through continuously. And because we do, with the support of the Heritage Properties Working Group, we have a lot of material really ready to go. So it is just a matter at this point of putting that process in place and actually bringing it before committee and council for approval. Thank you.
Good, thank you. And Mr. Burton?
Hi. Yes, I think the intention for our client is to proceed immediately after getting approvals, which is first of all Committee of Adjustment variance, which it's in for right now, and then a building permit. The idea is that they would like to be finished by next June. So as soon as possible is the answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Jane, further comments?
Yes. So if this is to proceed immediately, I'm a little concerned about the ability, at this point, Heritage Kingston committee members wouldn't have an opportunity then to comment, because if we wait for the batch, that's going to be down the road a wee bit. I guess we could bring this up at the August meeting and take it forward to council for designation then. I agree with Dawn and others who commented that because this project is going to move forward, it would be good for it to be designated sooner rather than later. Thanks.
Andrea?
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Definitely, we would like to see this building designated sooner rather than later. I do think that in this case, because of the requirement for the notice of intent to demolish, the applicants have actually benefited from an HK review through the dash comments. So I think from where I sit, even if this building was designated, I think we would now have the comments that we would get through the permit as well. Unless, of course, committee members were kind of holding back their comments because of the scope of the application. But I think the applicants would be happy to hear any of those comments and take them into account for their designs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other speakers here? I see no hands. I see no waving. And I will wait for item 10 to see if you want to put a notice of motion in. Committee members, final comments? Done. You need to unmute. Done, you need to unmute.
Trying there. Okay.
Yep.
Right. Sorry about that. So I clicked a few times, but it didn't go through. Well, I'm pleased that Andrea suggested that we can submit additional comments, which will go forward with the file. I mean, as it stands, what's going to happen will be decided between the applicants and city staff. And so I want to make a clear statement that the proposed rear glass addition would be unacceptable according to guidelines for any of Kingston's heritage districts. Furthermore, the heritage impact statement fails to discuss and justify its design, that is the design of the glass addition, in the streetscape between the Oddfellows Block and the Simpkins building next to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That will be in the minutes. Anybody else commenting? If not, I'm looking for a mover for the recommendation that the notice of intention to demolish a one-story brickwork addition at 179 Sydenham Street be received and no further action be taken. Moved by William Kelly, seconded by Councillor Oosterhoff. Discussion. Seeing none, those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. That is one of the more unusual ones that we ever have, and it's followed by a yet more unusual one. This is our unusual morning. Ryan, are you introducing the amendment to the designating bylaw?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Okay, off you go.
Yeah. Just bring it up here for you. Yes.
This is one that we really need our maps for.
Can we get the presentation up, Derek, James?
It's coming.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, another little unusual. It's one that the committee doesn't see very often. What we're looking at today is an amendment to an existing designation. So there's no actual development taking place, but this is a correction or a change to the designation bylaw itself. So the property, if you wanted to skip to the next slide, the subject property includes 3 separately conveyable lots, namely 1911 Berbick Road, which is up at the top. It's hard to see on the slide, but there are lines showing the different lots. 1417 Sunnyside, which is the bottom kind of triangle piece, and 1517 Sunnyside Road, which is the remainder of the property. The property is on the north side of Sunnyside, north of the highway, and extends all the way to Berbick Road. I want to skip to the next, please. It's known historically as the Johnson Farmhouse, which is located at 1517 Sunnyside Road. It's a 1.5 story brick Ontario vernacular farmhouse built in the 1860s. Can we skip to the next slide, please? The designation bylaw was passed excuse me, in 2017. As I noted, the building was built in the 1860s, early 1870s. Its culture heritage attributes that are noted in the bylaw are specifically related to the red brick farmhouse itself, with its veranda and roof profile and such. I would note in the bylaw that it does not speak to the large rural property, particularly those portions to the south at 1477 and north at 1911 Burbrook, which are now separate holdings. Can we skip ahead, please? So when this property was originally designated, the property was approximately 34 hectares in size, with frontage on both Sunnyside and Burbrook. The property was severed in 2018 to create 2 vacant building lots. And as a result, the subject lands are now 3 separately conveyable lots, one at 18 hectares, one at just over 1 hectare, and one at 14 hectares. The designated bylaw was registered against the entire holding back in 2017 and now continues to appear on the title of all 3 lots. So the owners of the respective properties have submitted an application under section 30.1 of the Heritage Act to request council to amend the designating bylaw to correct the legal descriptions in order to clarify that the cultural heritage value of this property is specifically that Johnson Farmhouse, the brick farmhouse at 1517 Sunnyside Road. Section 30.1 of the Act authorizes council to enact bylaws to amend designating bylaws, which were passed under section 29 of the Act. Council is required before giving a notice of proposed amendment to consult with its Municipal Heritage Committee, which is where we are today. The staff have reviewed the cultural heritage value of the original designating bylaw and note that all the attributes relate to the brick farmhouse, the Johnson Farmhouse, located at 1517 Sunnyside. There's no change is proposed to the statement of cultural heritage value or the attributes of the original bylaw. And the current owners have no objection to retaining the designation. The amendment is simply to remove the bylaw from those portions at 1477 Sunnyside, which is the bottom you can see on the screen, and 1911 Burbrook, which is the north portion. And it is recommended that it is recommended of staff that Heritage Kingston recommend to council to direct staff to serve the notice of intention to amend, and should no objection be received within the 30-day appeal period, that staff recommend that council approve the amending bylaw to correct this legal title. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good, thank you very much, Ryan. Questions from committee members? Thank you for the map. It makes an awful lot more sense when you have the map there, you know. Seeing none. Members of the public? Let's flip down to make sure you don't see any hands there at all.
No, I do not see,
see
any
nothing at
either,
all.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, I look for then a mover for the recommendation, which you have on page 4 of the agenda that was just on the screen. Looking for a mover for that, please. William Hale Kelly, and a seconder. Moya, thank you very much. Further discussion? Seeing none then, the motion as printed. Those in favour? Those opposed? Thank you very much. That is approved and goes on to council. I believe we have no working group reports. Is that right, Mr. Clerk?
That is correct.
Ryan, emergency approvals?
None to report this month.
Thank you. Motions, we have none. Notices of motion? Nope, seeing nothing there. Other business? Oh, you're a lovely group today, aren't you? Correspondence?
Just the one piece on the addendum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you from Mr. Downey. Yeah. And the next meeting then, August the 19th, 9:30. One wonders where it will be. Did we take bets? Oh, you think William is not?
I think William's offering to host it at his place, actually.
Oh, good. Thank you all so much. Good luck, keep safe, etc., etc. And thank you. Thank you, visitors as well.
Mr. Chair, we'll just get a motion to adjourn, make it official.
Motion to adjourn from Councillor Oosterhoff and seconded by Jane. Thank you very much. Those in favour? Those opposed? Excellent. Goodbye and thank you. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, James.